Okay guys, so today I wanted to talk to you about one of the e-arcs that I have gotten recently from NetGalley, and that is the Gilded Ones by Namina Forna. This is a really cool YA fantasy that I enjoyed immensely. It was fun, but it was also very dark, a lot darker than I was expecting it to be for a YA book. It is also a debut, which I love, like supporting like new authors. So it hit all those notes, and I just really kind of wanted to like talk about what I loved about it, the few things that like I wasn't as big of a fan of, and just kind of give you a rundown in case you want to pick this up when it releases very, very soon. The Gilded Ones is an African-inspired YA fantasy novel. In this book, we are following Dika, who is a 16-year-old girl from this like small rural village who grew up with basically just her father. Her mother has passed away from sickness a few years prior to this story starting, and when we meet her, her mother's already passed away. She's kind of like helping her father with farming, and she is preparing for this ceremony that all girls have to go through when they turn 16 to test their purity. And their purity is tested by the priests, and basically they just kind of cut you ritually to see what color you bleed. If you bleed red, then you are pure. If you bleed gold, then they believe that you are a demon and you are essentially just murdered. You're killed, and everyone turns on you because you are this like demon, and they don't believe that you are the person they thought you were. Well, Dika is ready. She's very different from the rest of the girls in her village. It makes that known right off the bat. She has some friends, but she's very kind of picked on and looked down on because she looks different, because her mother was actually an outsider. She didn't come from this village, and in this society, it's all very close-knit. Like, people don't really travel outside of their own communities very much. So Dika's just kind of, you know, she's a little... So as she's kind of preparing for this ceremony, and she's like ready for this ceremony, you know, of course it's a book. Things can't always go as planned. We come to find out that Dika does bleed gold. She is one of these demons. So of course everyone turns on her. The priests take her, and it's very, very dark and violent at this point. And then somebody comes and saves her, but in doing so, she's basically enlisted in the military in a specialized group of girls who are all unpure, unnatural, tainted, and they are supposed to be utilizing their abilities because they have this golden blood to help protect the empire from this like encroaching evil that just keeps kind of killing people and getting worse and is just like becoming this bigger threat. So she is taken to do all of this to kind of protect the empire. She meets a bunch of other girls like her, and she also meets these men who are their age. They are also conscripted into the army, and they're told that these boys will basically be paired with a girl. So for one girl, we get one boy. They are paired together, and they are like fighting partners. And so that's basically the premise of this story, is Dika kind of figuring out who she is, fighting for this empire that hates her, meeting all these other girls who are, you know, just like her and going through a lot of the same struggles as her. And it's just really, really cool. It's very filled with magic, but it is also a very, very dark book, especially for a YA book. I did not expect as much darkness as I got from this book. So if you are interested in reading this, go in knowing there are some pretty heavy trigger warnings to kind of be aware of. There is sexual assault, trauma, torture, death of a parent, death, of course, of a loved one. It's a very patriarchal and racist society. So just kind of go in knowing that this is not a typical like YA fantasy where it kind of glosses over these things, because it definitely does not. And honestly, after reading it, I was a little confused as to why it is marketed as YA, where it could easily be marketed as either like new adult or even adult, because it's darker, it's got those darker themes. And I think just because it is from the point of view of a 16-year-old does not mean it is typically YA, because we can have books that are adult books but follow young protagonists. Poppy War, for example, we follow Ren as a teenager, but it is definitely a adult book. I don't think this is as like dark and violent and gritty as the Poppy War, but it's a lot darker and more gritty than a lot of YA books in my opinion. So just be aware of that if that's something that bothers you, or if that's something that like excites you, because I know I like a darker book, so I liked that aspect of it. But I also think it's important to know that it's gonna be there. There are so many pros about this book, so many things that I loved. First and foremost, I loved the found family aspect of this book, because these girls are all like outcasts. They're all cast out of their villages. They are all, you know, fighting for the same thing, but they really don't really care about the empire. They want their freedom, and they want to, you know, not be hunted and murdered because of something that they can't control. And they just kind of make this really good family bond, sisterly unit. And I absolutely loved that aspect of it. Seeing them train and fight together and have each other's backs was really, really good to see, especially when in a lot of YA books, it's really common to pit girls against girls. And there really is none of that, and I was really, really happy. I think there was also a very good balance between training scenes and actual like fighting, meaningful moments in the book. It is not all school setting training, but it is also not all bloody battles. There's a really good balance there, which is something that in some other books that I have read recently is not present. Honestly, in my head, I compared this to Rage of Dragons. And this is basically a dark YA version of everything I wanted Rage of Dragons to be. And it makes me really happy, because I wanted to love Rage of Dragons, and for some reason, this just gave me very similar feelings. The story is completely different. Don't get me wrong. We follow a 16-year-old girl as opposed to a boy. Like, it's very, very different, right? But it was very similar in what I wanted. I wanted that found family, that balance between training and actual like meaningful like campaigns of war. And it just gave me a lot of what I feel like I was missing from Rage of Dragons. So that's why like I kind of compared them in my head. But I really, really recommend it. The training scenes are really good, and the actual battle scenes are really good, so I like having that balance there. I also really think that like the mythology and everything kind of behind it with their gods and the demons and these girls and what they are and who they are, and discovering all of this is really, really well done and interesting, because we are kind of learning this world with Dika, because there's a lot of things that she does not know coming from this like rural village. So we are slowly learning different things along with her, and it's not like big info dumps. It's really good realizations, and that is something that I really, really appreciated, because we're getting little bits and pieces, and then we start to piece it all together, and then like the gods and the demons and the mythos starts to really make sense and kind of click together at the end. And I really, really enjoyed that aspect of the book. I also really liked that there was no real like cliffhanger ending. It was wrapped up pretty well, but we also still have questions, and we know that this is going to be a series. I can't remember if it's going to be a trilogy or a duology, but it is, I believe it's the Deathless series is what the actual series name is for this. So it is going to be a series, so we know that there's going to be more that happens after the end, but I'm not like unsatisfied and like I need it, I need it, I need it. I want to know what happens, but I'm not like stressed out because there's a cliffhanger and I have to wait, you know, however long until the next one comes out. I'm happy with the resolution, but still excited to see what happens next. Now, there were a couple things that weren't my favorite. And one of those is kind of the romance of the book, and it's not the romance itself. I actually really liked the cute little romance that happens because there's, you know, it's not a love triangle, it's not insta love, it's not any of those typical YA tropes that I'm kind of sick of seeing. But I wish that it would have been slightly more developed on page. We get a lot of references to an off-page development of this relationship between Dika and this other individual. And it's like, okay, I wish we would have seen that. But when they do finally kind of like come together in their little romantic moment, it is very sweet, it is very touching. I actually really, really enjoyed it because for one, this is a very, very patriarchal society, and to see a man actually not being that way and then multiple men deciding that like this is not how we're gonna be anymore, this is not what's going to happen, we're not going to go with the cultural norms, is really, really refreshing to see. It's just like a whole group of men that have decided they're not going to go with the cultural norms, and I really appreciated that. But I still wish we would have seen more of that development. And kind of on the same lines as that, I wish we would have seen more development of the male partners to the demon girls, because we get like little bits and pieces of it, and we're supposed to believe that they have this like inseparable bond between, you know, these two fighting partners, but we don't see much of that on page. We're just kind of told that. So I really wish I would have seen just a little more of that, and maybe we'll get more of that in the second book. But that's something else that I like really, really wanted to see. There were also a few like plot points and twists and what have you that I found very predictable, but it really didn't bother me because some of the big ones were like, oh, okay, that's great, that's cool. Like it kept me on the edge of my seat. But then there were ones that were like, I think we're supposed to be like bigger realizations. And I was like, oh, I figured that out. Like I figured it out. Why didn't the person figure it out? So that was just like, I like being kept on the edge of my seat, but it's not like a necessary negative when I figure it out before the characters or before we're told. But it bothers some people, so I wanted to kind of put that out there, that some of the twists were a little predictable. And finally, my last like negative, I guess, was the ending. While I loved it and I loved how it ended and wrapped up, that it happened kind of fast. Everyone just kind of accepted this one thing that happens, and you're like, I feel like they would have like questioned it a little more or something along those lines. Like it just was kind of like, it's done, this happened, this is the thing, everybody accepts that this is the thing, so let's roll with it. So that was a little underdeveloped in my opinion, but I still liked the ending, and I'm hoping that it gets like a little bit more development in book 2. All in all, I really enjoyed this book. I'm very excited to see what other people think about this book when it comes out. I'm very excited to see what happens with the series going forward. And if you have read this already, if you got it, I know it came in like an Illumicrate box at one point. You know, there's a lot of NetGalley arcs that have been out there for this, and then it comes out very, very soon. I think the 19th of January, so it might already be out by the time this video is live, but I want to know if you're excited about this book, if you've read it, what you think about it, and just let me know. I would love to talk to you about it. All right, thank you guys for hanging out with me. My name is Jessie, and I will talk to you later. Bye.